Welcome back to Round the Studios, Scottish history from a different perspective, with me, Karen Mailley. So, Around the Studios explores Scottish history through a variety of individuals, historical events, and artworks. Although Around the Studios is a feminist retelling of Scottish history, this is an intersectional feminist podcast, and we aim to be inclusive and supportive in all ways. This podcast will have a range of guests who will tell some of Scotland's stories through a variety of the individuals, historical events, artwork, archives, museum collections, and all through Scotland's built environment. A couple of months ago, an amazing artist reached out to me and we ended up chatting. Her name is Elaine Woo MacGregor. Elaine is a Scottish born Chinese artist who trained at the Glasgow School of Art. She graduated with a Bachelors Degree with honours. She acquired a studio and began working full time as an artist. She has won an array of awards, including in 2023, she was awarded the RSA Blackadder Houston Mid Career Travel Award, which she used to travel to Hong Kong and Shanghai to undertake some art research the following year. She has exhibited in Australia, Thailand, USA, and throughout the UK. While her painted stories may be fictitious, they are rooted in real people, places, and objects. And this meant that we had a lot to talk about. Once I got into Elaine's studio, which was adorned with an array of various references for her new work, we managed to sit down and talk about a variety of topics, including strong women, suffragettes, and wee ghosties. I hope you enjoy.
It's Around the Studios. Professor Mailley! But not actually a professor.
I think we should probably start with your art education and how you got into art.
I think I really got into art from a very young age. I think I drew before I was able to write, and it was something that I just loved doing. In primary school, it'll be something that I'm like rushing to get the maths done or the writing part done so that I can have that free time, even if it's 10, 15 minutes just to be given a piece of paper and just draw from your imagination. And my love for studying art, I think, really flourished when I went to James Gillespie High School in Edinburgh. There was an excellent art department at the time, and I was lucky enough to have George Coburn being my S1 teacher. And he was quite a kind of traditional art teacher in the sense that you need to learn to draw well before you get the paints out, before you look at contemporary art. He went to ECA and he got taught by very well-known established Scottish painters. And I think he was very kind of informed by the art scene in Scotland through the different decades. So he was keen to teach, to pass down his knowledge to his pupils. But I just really loved his kind of hands-on, old school way of teaching, setting up still lives. There was a lot of animal skulls. And he wanted to see if his students can draw and draw well and have the ability to observe and draw beyond just like copying what's in front of them, is have that vision, but that energy there that every talented student that he's met have a very unique style. And it's amazing to think of so many artists who went through James Gillespie High School and taught by him has done very well in the art career, who end up being very good art teachers as well as having a creative practice. And I think hats off to him for sure. I think that has grounded me. And then I guess when I was in high school, I wasn't sure which route I was going to take. I was actually thinking, oh, maybe I'll go into design. Maybe through being a designer, the pay would be better and and a bit more the opportunities. And then, the idea of, oh, you get an annual salary sounds very attractive. But then it was through going to Glasgow School of Art open day and creating my portfolio, as well as actually at the time I was applying for a master's design course just across the road, also with GSA, but with product design. And I got offered a place to do the master design course, but I turned it down because I just felt my heart wasn't there. Yeah, I wasn't in it. And I felt like I would be lying to myself if I'd gone down the route of studying this wonderful design course, but it just felt it wasn't
you?
100% me. And I felt if I had gone down that route, I think I would be living life with regrets of not studying in the Mac, which is just literally across the road. And I had to make that decision because the entry route was a bit different. So I already done my interview with fine art, drawing and painting, with GSA. And an interview went well, but they don't give anything away in terms of how well you have done. And that predates the kind of digital portfolio submission. It was lugging this really heavy portfolio in, and they would scrutinize your sketchbooks, your life drawings, your paintings, all the work that you feel is deemed good enough for the portfolio. So there was a waiting game, waiting to get that letter with that Macintosh letterhead logo. And I remember it was the most nerve-wracking letter I opened in my kind of formative years, to be given an unconditional offer for the fine art course. I was just over the moon, cloud nine, and I feel like, yes, did it. And the next would be just looking forward to starting the 4-year course, and never looked back since. Amazing experience, and to kind of look back and think of all those beautiful north-facing painting studios, the Hen Run, the Mac Lecture Theatre, even though it was not the most comfiest places. I had wonderful art mentors, from Sandy Moffat to Hannalena Fisness and Moyna Flanagan, Stuart Mackenzie, Annetta Hare. Really excellent lecturers at the time that kind of opened the world of drawing and painting to me, and also in a way kind of preparing you how to continue to see like an artist and how to survive like an artist in a way, which is
Important.
yeah, which is very important. And it's not about preparing you in the business world. It's more about, if this is what you want to do, you need to stick at it and don't overthink it, and just have to find a way to make it work. And that could be juggling multiple jobs, but if it's your calling, ask yourself if there's anything else you can do better. And if it's for money, then do it. But if this is what you really want to do, you really got to stick at it. So there's no kind of airs and graces or dressing as something ultra glamorous, because it isn't. But they've taught me the wonderful kind of world of various painters that they admire, or artists' work that they admire. And that is enough to kind of feed you in your vision and where you want to be and how you want to grow.
What year did you go to? What year did you start?
I started in 1999, so I went straight after high school. Daunting in a way when you think about it, but I guess I just loved art, so I didn't think too much about it at the time. But starting art school at the age of 17, I was only 17. Yeah, because my birthday's in October, so I didn't turn 18. There was mature students, and it was a big step, big move to leave home, move to a different city. Art school life in the city of Glasgow is quite something.
How to put it, it's character building.
It is, and developing ways to kind of create your own social life, finding friends, finding yourself, people who are like-minded, and you go through quite a bit of a transformation, I think, from being a school leaver to going to uni, leaving home, or going to art school and finding your kind of people.
People you connect with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But that's interesting. You went in
1999, and I graduated in 2003. And not long after graduating, I got a studio with WASP because I had a couple of good art mentors who had space. They have a studio space with WASP in Glasgow, and they advised me, right, before you graduate, put your name down for a studio, because the waiting list is 2 to 3 years. And they said, if you're serious with your art, I would do that sooner than later. So I did that when I was in 3rd year, and it was great advice, because it meant that within months of graduating, I was able to take up a studio space, which was affordable. And that was very important to me. It meant that I was still able to make work. It made the transition period from a graduate to a practicing artist not too difficult to attain in a way.
Where was your first studio?
East Campbell Street, so across the road from the Barrows.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a never a dull moment, should I say?
I was gonna say that's quite it's quite an area.
Yeah, yeah. Monday to Sunday, you know, there's always gonna be some kind of noisy periods. I have to say, it's not the safest place ever. I wouldn't like to work there late and be the last person leaving the building. And there's certain times of the week, especially when there's a football game on, I'll be very, very cautious, you know, in terms of what the atmosphere is like outside. But at the same time, the first studio I had, it was on the top floor of East Campbell Street. It's an open plan space. And it was a great way for me to meet lots of wonderful artists, some of which I'm still friends with, you know, many of them. So friends like Jackie Parry, John Taylor, Jim Pattison, Joe Ganter, you know, many of them have been in that building for many years before I arrived. And over time I got to know them well, and we just became friends. And we go and hang out and have drinks together and go to each other's openings. And there's just a sense of camaraderie about the place and support. Yeah.
I think, especially from my own research, I find it fascinating that art history seems to not purify the artists, but they don't seem to see the place as much importance of like who they're hanging out with, their friendships, and that sort of impact. Especially with Glasgow, I would say Glasgow artists because that's obviously my background. Like Macintosh is still heralded as Macintosh, but he's hanging about with like so many different people.
Yeah.
How they would be doing the same thing as you would be doing, going to openings, supporting each other, networks. And I just think now is the important time to record the same sort of conversations that we're having, make sure that they're not forgotten.
Dr. Mailley.
So I'm with Cynthia Corbett Gallery. So she first came across my work in my degree show. I've shown with her for quite a number of years after graduating art school, and which was great. You know, Cynthia at the time gave me an opportunity to show in London, and she promoted Scottish women artists, Scottish women artists who freshly graduated from art school as well, which was wonderful when you think about it. Back in 2003, she would have special curated show around that, showing women artists that she found through degree shows across all four Scottish art schools, and that would encompass artists working in the medium of photography, painting, I think also sculpture.
That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. And she would take the work down to like London art fairs or finding venues and creating shows under that kind of thematic idea. I just kind of wanted to take a break from working in that sort of commercial kind of way of meeting lots of deadlines. And I felt like I wanted to take a break from that and apply for artist residencies. And that's when Cynthia and I just took a very, very long break until that pandemic sort of time. We both got in touch, and that's, what was it? Has it been almost 20 years? Yeah, since then. And then we just reconnected. Things do sometimes resurface and strike a new dialogue, a new way of, I guess, seeing into my work. And then also for me to kind of work with Cynthia and to see various other opportunities that can flourish from reuniting.
That's a really lovely, it's such a long relationship as well.
Yeah, yeah. And then, you know, lots of things have happened, like from when I graduated to working with Cynthia again in recent years, you know, being a mom of two daughters, just adding extra layers really. And it's just really nice to know that never say never. And so Cynthia has taken my work overseas a lot and given me lots of opportunity.
So where's your work being shown then? Internationally?
It's been collected in the United States of America, Australia, I have shown in pieces in Tasmania as well. I think that was a very fun art project, which led to a group show out in Tasmania. So I remember doing a very kind of interesting ink painting inspired by mapping for that show. Thailand as well, that was organised by an artist, a Thai artist called Nok. She had a wonderful vision of bringing international artists together from the Fairmont Studio Centre Artist Residency, and she just have a wonderful energy about her, and she just created this group show opportunity out in Thailand. So, and then I think closer to home, shown down in London many times, and I'm trying to think now, in Europe.
But you've shown widely.
I have. I've done like residencies in China quite a few times, and that was more in the sense of doing some lecturing and gathering research for my own work back in the studio, as opposed to doing a residency, but on the back of that, have work on display in an exhibition. I think, one of the highlights was in one of the art fairs that Cynthia curated. I think it's maybe one that also had connection with Citibank. The exhibition may have been in LA, I think.
Right.
And she updated me one evening with a picture of the hang, and I was proud as punch because it was a painting that I did of Peggy Guggenheim with crazy fluorescent colors, and she had a big billowing dress on in my painting with, gorgeous dangly earrings that she often wears. And in that painting in the background, there's like galloping horses and hounds, and you look like there's a sense of urgency about it. And the colors that I used for that painting were like fluorescent orange and neon yellows. And for the hanging, that painting was hung right next to a pencil drawing of a child by Francois Gillot. And I was just, my jaw just dropped. And I couldn't sleep well that night because I saw that message and saw the photo. And I was just like, oh,
Adrenaline.
yeah. I just finished the book written by Francois Gillot, Life of Picasso. I was already thinking of creating a painting with her in it, telling the story of her meeting Matisse. And then it's just the fact that, Cynthia, gave me this opportunity when my artwork was hung next to Francois' drawing. I was like, oh my gosh, humble moments, very, very humble. And I was just like, yeah, just so happy. I felt like I was a kid.
I was wondering, do you want to talk more about the current themes that you're working with the intersection of heritage and is it the cityscape?
What I've been working on kind of has grown out of creating a body of paintings inspired by stories of the Silk Road. And I guess that goes back to 2023 when I got given the Elizabeth Blackadder, the Blackadder Houston RSA, mid-career travel award. That travel award gave me the opportunity to spend almost a month in China, in particularly visiting art galleries and museums in Hong Kong and then Shanghai, drawing a comparison between those two cities with a lot of history around trade surrounding its port and its harbour. At the time, I didn't really think I was going to do some paintings inspired by history or history of the Silk Road. So I just went there with a complete open mind to think about my Chinese heritage, cross-cultural identity, to think about stories of people and migration in southern part of China, but also in Shanghai. Like prior to going to Shanghai, it was wonderful to learn that during World War II, they took in many thousands of Jewish refugees. They helped to really kind of invest and build modern China. And the infrastructure in Hong Kong, the engineering infrastructure that was largely funded by these powerhouses of Jewish families. It's something that I knew nothing about when I was a child. So it's very kind of enlightening in a way to see how just through people sense of displacement or fleeing from one country, the strive for just to succeed in life and to survive, they became very entrepreneurial and they want to integrate and to work with local resources and people and find a way to make it work and how to strike business with people who have very different sort of religion or political systems, how to make it like a successful partnership. It was interesting to hear that they too wanted to help, the Jews during the awful Holocaust, and it just for me is wonderful to learn about that history of Shanghai, and how around about 1900s it was a thriving place. It was so cosmopolitan. It was like New York, Manhattan, or Paris, with lots of foreign investments, creating like beautiful kind of bank buildings along the Bund to in different sort of residential areas with architecture that have that Western Art Deco aesthetic or Dutch influence aesthetic, beautiful mansions with balconies in it. And they've been around for over 100 years, and it's just incredible to see that with my own eyes and how well it's preserved as well. So I love that in China there's all these multifaceted layers of cultural identity and migration stories. And then when I got back to my studio, I want to learn more about world history and also how the Far East had its play in world history. And that's when I discovered books written by Peter Frankopan, in particular The Silk Roads, the first edition. And then I've, decided to read the second Silk Roads book, also by Peter Frankopan. And I learned so much about world history through that, but seen from the East, the origin of the Silk Roads and how horses was such a big part of power and trade. The Chinese emperors, found horses from the north so desirable because of their speed and their resilience. So they would often trade their goods for these horses, these super powerful horses. And then the mythology around these animals, this kind of idea of a blood sweat horse, it conjured up these kind of visions of almost like mythological creatures, ultra powerful horse-like creatures. And obviously, historically, there's kind of it's shrouded in myths and superstition. But now scientists think it's maybe because when their blood vessels dilate so much, and these horses, their particular type of breed where the skin is maybe a little bit thinner, so when they run really fast, their blood vessels bulge out, and maybe because they're sweating and the color of their hair, maybe it's like chestnut red. Under certain light, it looks like it's bleeding, especially like really bright sunlight. I just kind of love that, reading the book and learning about all these historical tribes and how sometimes very gory and horrible histories, so ruthless. And then a lot of interesting kind of human kind of stories around it as well, like the princess who smuggled silk, the secret silk to Khotan, and then learning about Persian Empire and all these wonderful women who took up very important roles in society and made decisions like in terms of art, culture, and architecture. And again, I feel like, how come I didn't learn anything about that at school? These women are like existed, hundreds of years ago or thousands of years ago, and they were like such key figureheads. And I feel like, well, why not paint them, paint their stories? The body of work, which I end up calling the Daughters of the Silk Roads, kind of came to light from that, which led to creating an art publication earlier this year around that, and it's the work hasn't stopped. I think it's made me, I guess, even more observant and more aware of stories around us that actually could continue sparking this dialogue on the idea of daughters of the Silk Road. So we're just keep on discovering these wonderful kind of narratives of women out there that in some ways help me kind of continue that thread or that train of thought. So what I'm currently working on is inspired by the suffragettes story. And it's upon reading this book, Sophia, by Anita Anand. I came across the story of Sophia Duleep Singh through listening to Empire podcast. And they had an episode looking at this Punjabi princess who became suffragette. I was just so captivated from just listening to that one episode. They mentioned how Anita Anand wrote a book about her and thought, oh, got to get a copy. And I just couldn't put it down. I read it from cover to cover. And then I thought, oh, that would make a very interesting series of paintings where I can look at the interiors at the time, kind of Edwardian, Victorian sort of era, and also women and how they had to kind of carry themselves and the stigma of where they are, how they're seen, whether the inside, outside, who they're socializing with, and the battle that they had to fight so hard for just to be given the right to vote and you know how that story came about. It's like it's wonderful. I remember learning about suffragettes in high school and second year in history, and learning about Emily Davison, you know, and how she tragically threw herself in front of the king's horse, and the arson that you know that they did in order to raise public awareness and to really kind of shake the government up into doing something. But I think just like reading books and listening to podcasts now, especially kind of podcasts presented by women, it gives a different slant. The angle in which it's being presented at nowadays through podcasts and books, it's so much more thorough and so much more in depth. And I think more evidence has come to light as well, the archives.
And also people just talking, I think, is quite important, because I find it interesting when you talk to somebody. It's like you're saying, it sparks something.
Yeah.
They know something. And then with the whole podcast thing, accessibility to that information is easier now than it was maybe like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think just bringing, I don't like the term marginalised, but stories that have kind of been, you know, pushed to whatever side for whatever reason to the forefront, and it just takes one person to be interested in that particular person, theme, or
Yeah.
and I think that's incredibly important.
It is. It is. And I like hearing the kind of backstories to these, in some ways, yeah, historians, to what you know, what gave them the idea to write about Sophia Duleep Singh, you know, or what fired them to write a whole book on Kitty Marion.
Is that Warren Riddles?
Yeah, suffragette. And it's just like, it is that sense of almost serendipity.
Yeah.
And I feel like with my creative practice, I do embrace that because, yeah, as an artist, you always have your eyes open. You're seeking to find something, some creative hook. But sometimes you just land upon something and suddenly it speaks to you. And it's interesting to hear about Anita Anand. She says she was, I think, don't quote me, I could have got it wrong, but I think she was on maternity leave and she was like going through a pile of magazines, and she just like picked up a magazine, and there's this black and white photograph of Sophia Duleep Singh wearing a fur coat, not selling, just handing out suffragette magazines outside Hampton Court residence where she was staying at the time, courtesy to the royal family. And she was like, who's this lady? Who's this Indian-looking lady handing out suffragette magazines? I never came across her before. And it's just like a short article about her in the magazine. She's like, I need to find out more. And her being a wonderful journalist, writer, historian, she's like, yeah. And, you know, that's where she kind of go, right, let's look at what historical archive is there. And it's interesting, not, you know, I think she had to kind of research very hard to find letters and to find any sort of legacy that you know, this Punjabi princess kind of left behind. And then interesting thing about Fern Riddle and her discovery of Kitty Marion. You know, she was studying at the time and went to a library to see, you know, what relevant resources could help her with her thesis. And then someone said, oh, why don't you have a look at Kitty Marion? She's a very well-known suffragette. She was a singer for sort of dance halls and theatres, and, you know, her immediate or initial reaction was about like, oh, I don't know, suffragettes. It's, there was a little bit of almost like a bit of apprehension from her end, maybe because it's being a woman and then talking about suffragette, there's maybe like, oh, is it too literal or too obvious an angle, or it's already spoken about or public already know enough about it.
It's a huge thing.
Yeah.
People, even now there's new stories being discovered, but I do sometimes meet people and they're like, but that's kind of been done. Yeah. Like, but it hasn't. It hasn't. You have to go deeper.
Yeah. Yeah.
And especially from a white middle class kind of lens, I think trying to understand in the fuller picture, and even like male allyship as well, especially with suffrage movement. I've been looking into that, but it's frowned upon in certain aspects. Like, you can't have the men.
Yeah.
So you can't tell the story without
the husbands who supported the wives.
Fran Newbery as well. He was listed as a suffrage supporter.
Yeah.
And he also supported Anne Macbeth when she went through hunger strike.
Rose Lamartine Yates, her husband was a lawyer, and she was thrown in prison for a short while for her protests and demonstrations. And then, you know, him being a solicitor, I think he even helped to defend her in trial. And, you know, I think the tone was like, you know, you need to control your wife or, you know, manage your wife better. But he was defending her. I said, no, I'm fully in support of her. And I think at the time there was that sense of, I guess, societal expectation and pressure on women. You know, she was a young mom, she had a child. They're like, oh, what's this woman doing? Abandoning her baby or toddler and do these demonstration protests and got herself
these horrendous
things and end up getting herself in trouble and
stupid
and locked away in prison. How can she leave her child to do this? But her husband was fully, you know.
I really do think that's important. And I think, again, it's these relationships and friendships that historians need to drill into a bit more.
Yeah. Because to know that there's these partnership and support and friendships that just spur you on.
Keep you
going. And even when it's through crisis times. So it's interesting, to learn about the suffragists and then the suffragettes and the differences. It's not just all under one purple,
big, nice, happy banner.
Yeah, purple, white, green banner. It's not common grounds through and through. But it's interesting how it all sparked off. It's not just because, like, no, one day women woke up and decided to make bombs and throw it into these places.
Build up.
Yeah, there was a build up because they were not being heard.
Or taken seriously.
And I'm just now is looking at the suffragettes movement and how the Daughters of the Silk Road story continues kind of weaving into this body of work, the idea of the dialogue with the Punjabi princess who became suffragette and how she was dealing with, of course, you know, in some ways, a turmoil of, you know, her Indian heritage, but also how she's fully funded by the British state as well. So her drive to really push forward women's rights to vote and, you know, to really support the suffragettes cause as well, you know. I just felt
Inspired by her.
Yeah. What a portrait to create. And when I do portraits, they're not like literal, like, oh, I had the full length portrait of someone, or it's actually portrait for a sense of storytelling, the idea of how to address this person through means of sometimes choice of colors or brushstrokes or subtle symbols that's kind of in the painting's composition. So I felt for her story to perhaps do it in a way that's a bit like Hogarth style.
Uh-huh.
The idea of telling a moral story, the sense of stages, almost like a theatre play, act 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The colours, I have to tone down my colours because just thinking of that era, Edwardian, Victorian. So start looking at wallpaper patterns. And then when you go down that route of looking at William Morris and arts and crafts movement and wallpaper history, that in itself,
You're like,
that's another kind of interesting creative chapter because of arsenic.
anymore. Arsenic.
Yeah.
Don't like your wallpaper.
Yeah, don't like your wallpaper. And arsenic wallpaper and arsenic green in clothing, various textiles, upholstery, and women were wearing green dresses.
Yep.
And I wonder if that, in terms of ghost stories of Scotland, the Green Lady, I wonder if she died from arsenic. Well, for dress. Just growing up in Edinburgh is Brunsfield Primary School, the gym. Oh, be careful, the gym, if it's dark, you might see the ghost of the Green Lady.
So you had a Green Lady, eh?
There was supposedly a Green Lady in Brunsfield Primary in the gym hall.
Did you ever see her?
No, but I don't know. I think sometimes it's more like getting your eyes closed, throw in the basketball and run.
Hope for the best.
Hope for the best. And I think it's like your imagination play tricks on you. But yeah, the Green Lady or the headless Green Lady.
Dr. Mailley.
Something I wanted to talk to you about was your strong women in your work, like Audrey Hepburn. How do you select? I know you were saying that something sparks, but
Yeah.
how do you then whittle down exactly who you want to focus on?
I think it's the initial trigger of seeing something that just catches your imagination. I think for me, with the Hollywood Icon series, it came about when I was a student. I think it was in my final year, where months leading up to the degree show, there's a sense of high energy focus of pulling things together. At the time, I think that particular year, I did a lot of research in theatre. I went to Theatre Royal in Glasgow, the beautiful carpet, the lovely sort of lamps, the decor. Wanted to create paintings that have that cinematic theatrical aesthetic. And I was looking at a lot of film stills by David Lynch and, like Blue Velvet, the gorgeous colours in that. And then I was collecting lots of images of Marilyn Monroe and Audrey Hepburn. But the pictures of them that spoke to me wasn't the kind of the glitzy, glamorous shots. It's usually photos where they reveal something of themselves, the human side to them, like feeling maybe a little bit apprehensive or just seems a bit more introverted. And it turns out the photographers who took these shots were close friends or photographers that these actresses did so well that they were completely at ease with their presence. And it's that sense of collaboration, but also relationship, and to capture these quiet moments, these more reflective moments, inner worlds of these icons that caught my imagination. So the compositions that I end up creating around, like, I guess, a more recent Audrey series, were maybe scenes of her where she's deep in her own thought, really, like whether she's just taking a seat in the MGM studio surrounded by props, whether artificial or real, exotic palm trees. It's that juxtaposition between someone as big as her but feels so dwarfed by the presence of the stage and the theatre, and almost like lost in amongst all that. But the magic's still there. And, with this particular painting I'm describing, you don't see her face, but there's something about the weight of Hollywood, but also the weight of her status is felt. But yet her elegant demeanor is, you can see it and feel it. Is that kind of aura. And I'm interested in capturing the aura of people. And sometimes I may not get it like looking like them, but I'm never interested in photo reality in my paintings. I admire some people who paint that way, but my mind is not wired in that way. I'm very kind of instinctive, and I'm drawn to mark making and almost like automatic kind of style of painting, working with immediacy and also like free association. So sometimes it's very fast moving when images and idea come to mind and I paint it. And when you work in that manner, sometimes I don't fully see what the painting is saying until it could be months afterwards I've done it. And it's like, oh, what did I just painted? So some of my Silk Road series where I'm looking at female characters that might be inspired by Persian queens and princesses, which dates back, a few thousand years. But in my painting, they are wearing different costumes. They could be wearing contemporary Western clothing with a big backpack, hiking, carrying a pair of trainers. But yet the landscape is like of a Gobi desert, but very, very cold with a starry night sky with no light pollution and completely barren landscape. So is that contrast of, is it old or is it now? And it's something that I like to do in my paintings, just kind of make people look and think and make a connection with the title, but yet, what belongs to then and what's now and what's something that's completely fabricated by the artist's own head. So there's a lot of kind of imagination at play in my work.
Yeah, I want to talk about that.
I think it's maybe because I was born in Edinburgh and grew up in Edinburgh. I just think of all these different cities, and my parents always had a thing about visiting cities. I think it's maybe stemmed from that. They grew up in very quite rural parts of China, and life was hard for them. In the kind of world of farming, agriculture in China post-war, and they felt the way to kind of make a living and find it easier to find work is to move to the city. So with my parents, their big move was to move from a kind of small place in Guangzhou to Hong Kong, and then immigrating to the UK. My dad went to London first and eventually, moved up to Scotland and settled in Edinburgh. For them, there's always that drawn to like the city because it means, better opportunities, better, work, better education. So I think it's maybe just came from that. And, my idea of the city is that every city has its own identity in a way, different vibe.
And different personalities.
Different personalities. I love how it does attract people of all ages, all ethnicity, different classes, different religions, and it's a big melting pot of all those elements. When I go to visit different cities to see the art, it's always good to spend time walking around and looking at architecture and observing people and just seeing differences in people's kind of everyday way of life, and just the odd kind of quirks really of these similarities, sometimes, or contrasts. And Edinburgh and Glasgow only have, an hour apart, but they're so different, so different. Just how people come across and the feel, the look of the city. And I think, the contrast of growing up in Edinburgh and then moving to Glasgow to study and then live and work, it's just, it's great. I think as an artist, You learn how to, in some ways, embrace people of all cultures, and also how to kind of look after yourself as well. Having studied in Glasgow and spending so many years living there, I think I was there for about almost 12 years.
Right. Last question. If there was one book you would recommend to people that are interested in Scottish art or Scottish artists, what book would it be?
Okay. It's hard to narrow it down to one book because when I go and see exhibitions, I like picking up artist catalogues. So that in itself, thinking I've got a catalogue of Carol Rhodes' work. Carol Rhodes was doing a fellowship in GSA when I was a student there, and she had a beautiful studio space in the Mac at the time, and I find her paintings very evocative, very surreal, a wonderful kind of painter. So I do have a catalogue for it. But anyway, if it's specifically Scottish women artists, I recommend this book called Modern Scottish Women, written by Alice Strang. And I particularly like the work by Nora Nielsen Gray. I rediscovered this old quote that I written down on an old bit of newsprint, and I never threw it away because I feel even to this day, this quote still holds very true to my creative practice. So this is a quote by a British historian, Richard Cavendish. When old myths are lost, new ones are needed. Myths flourish and fade and die. But new myths are born, old ones are resurrected. And hybrid forms combining new and old emerge when times change or cultures mingle.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
If you've enjoyed this episode of Around the Studios, why not tell your pals? You can find us on Instagram, YouTube, and Threads.
It's Around the Studios.